What's up everyone and welcome back to the Comms channel and our ultimate guide series for the VR-N76 and UV-PRO. In the last video we introduced these rugged, versatile radios and tackled some general questions. Today's video we're going hands-on with these radios without using the app. Whether you're upgrading from simpler radios like Baofangs or exploring these advanced features for the first time, this guide has you covered. From navigating buttons to mastering the advanced features, I'll show you how to unlock the full potential of these radios, so let's dive right in. Now this video will have a lot of information and we'll be tagging the chapters to allow you to skip to whatever parts you need. So the first thing we'll go over are the buttons for operating these radios. We have these larger buttons on the top with a D-pad for navigating up, down, left, and right. Additionally, there are two soft buttons on either side of the D-pad. Soft buttons serve multiple functions depending on what is displayed on the screen above them. The green one with multiple boxes changes frequently, and the red one is almost always a return button. Then below the section of buttons, we of course have the number buttons, which also serve as letters for entering in text in a T9 fashion. The star or asterisk button serves an extra purpose. Pushing and holding this will let you switch from frequency mode, where you can start punching in numbers to enter in whatever frequency you want to be on, or to switch to channel mode, where you can punch in the number of the channel you'd like to be on. The pound button, or hashtag as the kids call it nowadays, serves an extra purpose as well. Pushing and holding this will lock the keypad to prevent accidental presses. To unlock it, you just push and hold it again. Then on the side, we of course have the push to talk button and two programmable buttons below that can be programmed to do multiple things. Now these come pre-programmed with some functions by default, and we'll go over that now. Starting with the one directly below the PTT button, a short single press of this will turn on the FM broadcast band radio on or off. Long pressing this button acts as a second PTT for the other frequency that you have on the screen when you're in dual watch mode. If dual watch mode isn't on, this will just act the same way as the main PTT button. Next we have the other programmable button below that. A short single press of this button will cycle through the power levels, which you can see on the radio here going from L to M to H for low, medium, or high. Quickly double pressing this button will put the radio into Bluetooth pairing mode, and long pressing this button will set the radio's squelch to open. Now these are just the defaults that come with the radio. If you want these to perform other functions, these can be programmed via the app, and we'll cover that in another video when we go over using the app to program and operate these radios. So that covers all the buttons. Now we're ready to take a look at the menu options. Now, being that these radios are essentially the same, we'll mostly be going through the menus on the VGC version. There are a few differences between the radios we should quickly go over though. As mentioned in the previous video, the BTECH has NOAA weather radio and weather alerting. So there are menu options for that which aren't in the VGC. The BTECH also has an option for a Roger tone at the end of your transmissions, which the VGC also doesn't have. These additions to the BTECH do come in at a cost due to the extra memory they require. As a result, the VGC version offers 6 banks of 32 channels, providing a total of 192 channels, while the BTECH version has 6 banks of 30 channels, totaling 180 channels. So this will be something to consider when you're deciding which one best suits your needs. So let's get into the menu, and this button here with the green boxes will open that up. If we scroll down the menu here, we'll see they're the same until we reach the NOAA option on the BTECH. So let's check out this option on the BTECH and go into that menu. And here we have WX Scan, which will scan through the 7 NOAA weather channels so you can find which one you're able to receive. The next menu option below that, we have WX Channel. This is where you'll select whichever signal is the strongest for your location, which was WX3 here, so we'll go ahead and select that. Then we have WX Alert, which will monitor for the alert tone that NOAA sends out when there's a weather alert. Then we have WX Monitor, which will let you listen into whatever weather channel we set earlier. So in the first level of menus, NOAA is the only difference. If we go into the radio settings menu, the BTECH has a PTT release option, which the VGC doesn't have. This is where you can enable the Roger beep at the end of transmissions we mentioned earlier. Or instead of the Roger beep, you can have a data burst with either your ID and GPS location, or just ID, or just GPS location. And these will be transmitted at the end of your transmissions. The VGC can also do these data bursts, but it's configured in the Signaling Settings menu instead. These data bursts are using the BSS protocol, which is their own packet radio data protocol separate from APRS. The BTECH also has another menu option on the radio that the VGC doesn't have, and that's an option for audio relay, which is a feature that lets these radios act as a Simplex voice repeater. This is where the radio will record an incoming transmission and repeat it back. Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3.
Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3.
The VGC also has this capability, but this needs to be configured via the app, and there's no menu option for this in the radio itself. A few other slight differences to go over. First is under General Settings and then Signaling Settings. Here we can see the VGC has some additional options that the BTECH doesn't have. This is where we set the data bursts at the end of the transmissions on the VGC instead of the radio settings menu like on the BTECH. There is no Roger beep on the VGC, so there's no option for that. The final difference will be in the APRS Settings menu, which is under General Settings. Here we see an extra option for passcode on the VGC that the BTECH doesn't have. The VGC requires you to enter in a passcode, which is a number derived from your call sign. This is easy to find and just a matter of entering in your call sign into a website, which I'll include a link to in the video description below. So those are the differences in menus between the two. Now let's go over channel programming. Before we start, I will mention that this process is much easier from the app, but this video is focused on radio only operations, so we'll cover that here now. Now this is done via the Save to Channel menu option. This option only shows up when you're in frequency mode. So to program a frequency to a channel, you would go into frequency mode if you aren't already there by long pressing the asterisk button. You can tell what mode you're on by looking to see if there's a channel number directly under the battery icon on the top right. When you see no channel number, you're in frequency mode and can punch in the frequency you want to program in. Another thing we'll want to do before we program a frequency is to set the desired power level. The current power level is what will get programmed in. I like to always start off with the lowest power and increase if needed, so I'm going to set mine to low. Now let's do an example using one of the local repeaters here from W4KEV, and we'll program in the Knoxville repeater. We'll start by entering in the repeater downlink, which is 145.370, and then hit OK. Now we can go into the menu by hitting the green button and selecting Save to Channel. Then we'll scroll down to find an empty channel, or we can overwrite one of the channels that are already programmed, but we'll just scroll down to an empty one for this demo and hit select. Now that frequency is programmed into the empty slot we put it in, but since this is a repeater, we'll also want to enter in the input frequency, and in this case there's an input tone as well. To do that, hit the menu button, select channel, then we can hit left or right to get to the channel that we programmed in. Now once we're on that, we can hit edit and we can enter in a title, which will be W4KEV for this one. Alright, so the RX is good to go already, and this one doesn't have a receive squelch tone, so we can skip over that. Now for TX, we'll need to enter in the repeater input frequency, which is 144.770. For this, you just need to get the cursor down to where you want it and start typing in the frequency. So we'll put in 144.770 and then hit down to go to the next setting, which will be the input squelch tone. For this, we'll use the left and right buttons to change this, and the repeater is using a tone of 100 Hertz. So we'll keep hitting the right button until we reach that. Now there's no option to select CTCSS or DCS. If DCS is needed, we need to keep scrolling past the CTCSS tone options and we'll eventually reach the DCS options. The next option on the list here is pre-emphasis and de-emphasis, which can be left alone. Then below that we have scan, and when the radio is in a channel scanning mode, it'll only scan channels that have scan turned on. So set this to on or off depending on your needs. So we're good here. so we can go ahead and hit save, and here we can see we have our channel programmed in now. Follow this same process for any other frequencies that need to be programmed in. Another thing to take into consideration during channel programming is the channel groups. Remember, the BTECH has 6 groups of 30 channels and the VGC has 6 groups of 32 channels. Some possible ways we can go about this if there's a lot of repeaters in the area is to maybe have a channel group for 2-meter repeaters, another for 70 centimeter, and then maybe a group for GMRS, one for marine band, and maybe another for MIRS, or whatever makes the most sense for your needs. Before programming a channel, you'll want to set the radio to the desired channel group you want the channel to be in. Do this by going into the menu, then radio settings, and then scroll down to channel group and select that. Here we can see we're currently in channel group 01, and we can go down and select channel group 02. Now, any channels we programmed in will be located in channel group 2. Now, as far as naming the channel groups, there's no way to do it from the radio itself, but the groups can be named when programming via the app. I definitely recommend programming via the app if possible, but wanted to cover this process directly from the radio for this video. Now we're going to jump ahead in the menu a bit and set up APRS so we can properly show the message function when we get there. To get to the APRS settings, we'll go into the main menu, then General Settings, then APRS Settings. Now you may remember earlier that the VGC has an extra option here for a passcode. If you're on the BTECH, no need to do this passcode part. Getting this passcode is easy, and all you need to do is go to this web page, which I'll include a link to in the video description below. All you need to do is enter in your call sign, and it'll give you the passcode, which will be a 5-digit number. Now that we have that, we can enter in the call sign into the radio. Now that we have the call sign entered, we can go and enter in the 5-digit passcode, and if all went well, it should say correct. Now we need to enter in the path, which basically sets how many hops the packet will take. The recommended default is wide 1-1, wide 2-1. What all of these mean is beyond the scope of this video, but we'll be doing a series on APRS and we'll go in depth there. Next, there are some BSS related settings that you may want to configure, so let's go over those now. These can be found under Signaling Settings on the VGC, and a mix of Signaling Settings and PTT Release under Radio Settings on the BTECH. So for this first setting for ID, this is the BSS call sign. You could put in your FCC assigned call sign here or a tactical call sign as long as you're IDing with your FCC call sign every 10 minutes during a conversation. As you can see here, I'm using TC2 as a call sign on the VGC and TC3 on the BTECH. We'll skip over these VGC options in this menu for now and go over the options both radios have first. So the first one is Allow Check, and when this option is turned on, it allows for other radios to interrogate your radio for a response. We'll learn more about this when we get into the signaling menu. Then there's Signaling Preamble, and I'm honestly not entirely sure what this is for. The menu says this is to make the end tone sound more rounded, whatever that means. Now let's look at the remaining BSS related options. If you're using a VGC, stay in this menu. For the BTECH, go to the main menu, then Radio Settings, and then PTT Release. These settings configure what the radio does when you release the PTT button in the form of a data burst at the end of the transmission, with the exception of the Roger beep option the BTECH has. So with these options, we can have the radio send a data burst with either the ID and GPS location, or just ID, or just GPS location. These settings are more for operating via the app, where we can see the ID and location of other users via the map.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
The next thing we'll cover is messaging directly from the radio. Now back into the main menu, we have an option for signaling that we can go over now that we have our APRS and BSS settings configured. The first thing we have here is the send message feature. Now if you just send a message here, it'll send a message via the BSS protocol, which is only compatible with these radios, and the GMRS Pro, which also uses BSS. This won't be compatible with other APRS only radios, however, so if you do want to send an APRS message, enter in the call sign of the station you want to contact, followed by a colon, and then your message. Messaging back and forth directly from any of these radios is a pain, so I do recommend using the app or using the Bluetooth KISS TNC with apps like APRS Droid or APRS.5. But it is possible directly from the radio in a pinch, and wanted to cover that in this video. One thing to also note is these radios don't have enough memory to store previous messages like you can on the Kenwood radios, for example. But at a cost that's over 4 times less than the Kenwood, this is something I'm willing to sacrifice, especially since most of my messaging is done via APRS Droid. Now moving on to the rest of the signaling menu, we have Send DTMF. This is used to send DTMF tones, which are often used for remote controlling things like a repeater and some other types of systems as well. Here you just punch in the DTMF sequence you need and hit OK to transmit. The next option is Call, which is a BSS only feature. With this, you enter in the BSS call sign of a user that you want to get the attention of. So from the BTECH here, I'll go ahead and enter in TC2, which is the BSS call sign I'm using on the VGC. Then we can go and hit OK to send. The other radio will ring for about 45 seconds and display a notification on the radio screen until they hit OK or return to acknowledge it. Moving on down the list, we have Check, which is another BSS only feature. This will allow you to interrogate another user's radio via their call sign as long as they have the Allow Check option turned on that we showed earlier. If the user is within range, their radio will respond with their call sign and location. Nothing shows up on the radio itself when the other user responds, so this is more of a feature for the app. You will hear the other user's radio respond, so it could be used to see if they're in range though. Next up, we have the Nearby People option, which is another BSS only feature. Similar to the Check option, this will interrogate other users' radios, but it'll request a response from all of the radios within range instead of just a specific user, like the Check option. And we should receive the ID and location of everyone within range. Now back to the main menu, we have the next section we'll look at, which is radio settings. Some of these are self-explanatory that most other radios have, so we'll skip over those. Our first option here is Dual Watch, which lets you monitor 2 frequencies or 2 channels at once. Scan will scan through the channels that you have the scan setting turned on for. Talk Around will set the transmit frequency to be the same as the receive frequency when you have a channel with different transmit and receive frequencies like the repeater we programmed in earlier. Next we have the TX and RX subtones, which is where you would set the CTCSS or DCS tones. And we've already covered channel groups, and these next 2 are self-explanatory. Then we have tail elimination. Now the radios have a half a second or so delay after transmission, and turning on tail elimination will get rid of this delay. I highly recommend turning this on when using the radio for APRS or packet radio in general to avoid any issues. And below that we have digital mute. When this is turned on, the radio will mute any signals that are data like APRS or BSS. Then we have PTT follow. This is a feature for the dual watch mode, and when this is turned on and a signal is received on the frequency or channel that is on the subband, this will let you respond on that frequency or channel without having to switch as long as it's within 10 seconds. Then the last options in this menu are for Vox, which is for voice activated transmissions. Now on to another menu. Within the main menu, we have General Settings. Connection is for Bluetooth options for pairing and scanning, and we already covered the settings for signaling and APRS. Next we have KISS TNC settings, and the first option is to enable or disable the KISS TNC, and the next option I don't really understand its purpose and it seems a bit redundant. I believe if you're using the messaging and other data on the radio itself, having this setting turned on will also forward that through the KISS TNC. Then we have TX delay and tail. I would leave these as default unless you run into issues and need to troubleshoot. And back to general settings, the next option is going to be digital mode. Now, even when this isn't enabled, the radio will still send and receive BSS and APRS transmissions. This section seems to be more for automatic beaconing and setting which channel will be used for data transmissions. The share location setting is where we set how often the radio will beacon its location out. You want to set this to something that makes the most sense for your situation. For example, if you're stationary, transmitting your beacon every 20 or 30 minutes makes more sense than transmitting every minute and will save battery and reduce congestion. If you're mobile in a vehicle, then every minute or two makes sense. I don't recommend anything less than 1 minute if you're operating on the main APRS frequency of 144.390 to prevent congestion on the network. These radios don't have smart beaconing, unfortunately, which is something that automatically adjusts how often your radio beacons based on your movements. You can use the Bluetooth TNC in an app like APRS Droid for this functionality, however. Now, if you're operating on a different frequency, this is likely less of a concern, but just know that more frequent transmissions means you'll use up your battery level quicker. The next setting is digital channel. This is set to current by default, but you can change this and set a particular channel to be dedicated to digital transmissions. For example, if you're set up to automatically beacon your position at one of the intervals in the share location setting, you can be on another frequency or channel doing voice transmissions, and the radio will automatically switch to the channel that you set as the digital channel, transmit the beacon, and then return to the voice frequency you were using. The last setting here is format, and we can select either BSS or APRS for these data transmissions. Now, as far as the rest of the settings and general settings, these are self-explanatory. And if we go back to the main menu, the rest of these settings are self-explanatory there as well. And that just about covers everything for direct radio operation on these radios. If you're interested in picking up the version from VGC or the one from BTECH, we'll have affiliate links to them in the video description below. If you do decide to go with the VGC version, be sure to use our discount code of TCC during checkout for $10 off your order. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already done so, because we have much more to cover in this series. And in the next video, we'll be going over the available accessories for these radios. These videos take a lot of time and effort to produce, and if you want to help support the channel, we have a number of ways you can do so by either visiting the Ko-fi link in the video description, hitting the super thanks button on the video, or purchasing some of the merch we have available in our store. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to watch and hope to see you on the next one. Thank y'all and have a good one.